They call me the female Alex Haley, but this isn't the life I chose for myself. All I wanted to do was to live a quiet life and climb the corporate ladder, but I was laid off from my dream job. God had other plans. He was more interested in uprooting my self-hate and covert anti-blackness and told me to go on a mission to find myself by finding my ancestors. I am convinced that I'll never work again until I find them. Follow me, Victoria Gray, as I take you on my epic adventure to find Kunta Kinte. Healing and restoration is yours if you make it to the end.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Victoria Carlo's book launch of Akata, the Saga of an American Girl Finding Her Roots. My name is Kendra Julian. I am your host for the evening. Victoria has planned an amazing event for you guys, but first I would like to briefly go over some housekeeping. First things first, we would appreciate if you keep your mics mute. Vicky would also like to see everyone's face. If it's possible, she would love it if you can turn on your cameras. Next, Vicky will be hanging out in the chat, so be sure to engage with her and the rest of the guest speakers as the event progresses. Lastly, everyone who has registered on Eventbrite will be automatically entered into the giveaway. The top tier prizes include an Ancestry DNA kit and a couple of autographed books. All winners will be emailed within 24 hours. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome our guest of honor, Victoria Carlos, also known as the female Alex Haley. Victoria has recently published her debut book called Akata, the Saga of American Girl Finding Her Roots, available on Amazon. She's a motivational speaker, producer, and educator. Victoria and her husband, Pedro Carlos, own OCC & Co., where they make and sell African print baby bibs. Prior to her life as a creator, she worked as a digital marketing consultant, helping small and large firms build their online brand. Victoria holds advanced degrees from Trinity Washington University and Hawaii Pacific University. Everyone, please welcome Victoria.
Thank you, everyone. I know you're on mute right now, but I know I can hear your voice. Thank you so much for joining me. I am going to try my best not to cry. I'm just so overwhelmed, but I know that everybody in attendance doesn't know me, so I want to take the time to expand on my introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Carlos. I am a mother. These are my two beautiful children, and I am a wife to an African man. His name is Pedro Carlos. Now, if you read the first chapter of my book, you will know that that in itself is a miracle. Like my friends, Kendra said that I am the owner of OCC & Co., where I hand make African print baby bibs. And I am a speaker, an educator, and I love all things art. I thought that it was good for me to also expound on that introduction to get a better understanding of who I am. So I'm going to briefly talk about what this book is about. This book is my testimony. So from 2014 to about 2019, I went on a journey to discovering my ancestors. And that journey has taken me from near and far, far beyond. The first half of my book talks about how I grew up anti-Black. And I grew up anti-Black because of bullying, of being dark-skinned, and just made to feel undesirable. And it wasn't due to my parents, specifically my father, instilling Black history in me, but I was getting fed at home, but being bullied outside in society. And that in turn just made me reject all of things Black, reject all things African. And that self-hate and self-denial actually it stayed with me up until grad school, where there was a light shine in my face and I saw how ugly like my anti-Blackness was through the lens of my Hawaiian, Asian, and white students. in the book, and this is why I have a guest speaker by the name of Lola to talk about like African history and how it applies to African Americans, because I wish my father had the tools to explain African history to me while he was talking about Black history. In the book, I also talk about like my mental health issues of, you know, being a broke college student and trying to navigate the world as a young adult. And at some points of my story, it gets really dark. So I know that it would do me a disservice if I had a book launch and didn't have my best friend, who is a licensed professional therapist, to talk about mental health and the Black community. So that's a synopsis of the first half of the book. But the second half of the book talks about how I found my ancestors, and it gives a step-by-step process on how I did it. So this book is for anybody who is interested in Black history, anybody who is interested in becoming the historians in their families. But ultimately, this first book talks about the racial healing that needs to happen in America. And later on, I'm going to do a book reading, and I'm going to read my favorite part of the story. And it was an apology that I received from my white cousin, who actually apologized for what his ancestors did to my ancestors. And it healed something in me that I didn't even know that I was carrying. So I feel like I have been called to tell my people that there are people out here who want to apologize for what their ancestors did to you. And I hope that, you know, there's healing and forgiveness that happens on all ends. So I'll come back and I'll do my book reading, but I'm going to turn it over to my guests of honor to talk about the things that they need to talk about. Sorry. These are all the slides that I chose. Oh, I'm sorry. Last thing. I totally forgot I talked about this. For anybody who has read the book, I want you guys to take a good look at this slide. Okay, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but I can't guarantee that people won't spoil the book for you towards the end of the event. But this is basically my Kuta Kinte. And this book is African Americans at Mars Bluff, South Carolina, and you can pick it up at Amazon.com. And this is me standing next to Amelia Vernon outside of my ancestors' slave cabin in South Carolina in Mars Bluff. I'm not going to tell you who Ms. Amelia Vernon is. You got to read the book unless somebody spoils it for you towards the end. And now I will turn it over to Ms. Kendra.
Thank you. And just a friendly reminder, please don't forget to mute yourselves. All right, so now to our next speaker, Anastasia Adams. Anastasia Adams, she obtained her Bachelor of Arts degree in forensic psychology at Trinity Washington University in Washington, D.C. Anastasia obtained her Master's of Arts degree in clinical counseling from Eastern University in St. David's, PA. She's currently a licensed professional counselor in the state of Anastasia needs help spotting red flags, setting boundaries, and healing from breakups. She also facilitates couples therapy. She's also listed in the Best Marriage Therapist in Philadelphia on marriage.com. Anastasia, please take it away.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, just a continuation of the housekeeping. Please make sure that you're muted so that you can hear everything that Victoria and the other speakers have to say. So welcome to the book launch. My name is Anastasia Adams, as Kendra just stated. I feel so blessed to be here. I just want to give honor to God that He's allowed me to be here. And I just want to give honor to God that Victoria was able to make this project come into fruition. I'm so excited to be here. So why am I here talking to you all? As Kendra said, I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Pennsylvania. That means I have an advanced degree in mental health. And with that degree, I serve their various communities. And so Victoria talked about racial healing. And so my hope is that as a result of getting a copy of Victoria's book and reading it and gaining a deeper understanding of her testimony, My hope for you is that you can internalize and go on a journey for your own racial healing, whether you are someone who has been oppressed or whether your ancestors oppressed someone else, but taking an active role in the racial healing that needs to take place. My hope is that you will have a deeper understanding of self-care and how you are actually able to engage in self-care, because self-care is not just a buzzword or a hashtag on social media, where it's something cute, where you show yourself getting a Starbucks latte or getting a massage or getting in the jacuzzi, hashtag self-care, but really talking about how you can implement self-care in your daily life. And there are various valid reasons why many Black people may not be engaging in self-care, specifically going to therapy. And so I want to talk about something called post-traumatic slave syndrome, which is a term that was coined by Dr. Joy DeGruy. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name properly, but Dr. Joy DeGruy. And so she's the one who came up with this theory, post-traumatic slave syndrome. So that she came up with that, the name of that from post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a documented mental illness that you can find in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. So you can go to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a therapist, and share with that person about your experiences. And based on whether or not you meet the criteria, you might get a post-traumatic stress symptom, post-traumatic stress diagnosis. So this is not just something that applies to veterans. It could happen to anyone. Post-traumatic stress could apply to someone who's been sexually assaulted, someone who's been verbally abused, someone who's been in the throes of poverty their entire life. It doesn't just refer to someone who's come home from war that served in the military, and that may be the stereotype that people have in their minds. So if you go to Dr. Joy DeGrury's website, she gives a definition of what post-traumatic slave syndrome is. And so she has an acronym called MAP. And so what post-traumatic slave syndrome is, it means it is multi-generational trauma together with continued oppression. The absence of opportunity to heal or access the benefits available in society, leading to post-traumatic slave syndrome. So I'll read that one more time. Multi-generational trauma together with continued oppression, absence of opportunity to heal or access the benefits available in society, leading to post-traumatic slave syndrome. So what does that look like in real life? It looks like, well, let's talk about generational trauma or generational curses, as we talk about in the spiritual community or the church community. And like I said, my hope is that you will read Victoria's book and take an active role in racial healing and self-care and be spiritually grounded as a result of reading Victoria's book. And so trauma isn't just something that you develop because you're experiencing trauma in your day-to-day life. Trauma can actually be passed down in utero. So if you have a pregnant mother who is experiencing trauma, maybe that pregnant mother is being abused, yelled at, or she just doesn't have access to the resources that she needs, the baby that mother is carrying in her womb is also experiencing that trauma that the pregnant woman is feeling. So on a cellular level, trauma can be passed down from a family member to the next. So this is not something that is just mental. It is something that is physical, where trauma can be passed down at the cellular level. So what is the reason that some Black people are not seeking out therapy and engaging in self-care? Well, let's talk about self-care. Self-care is actually taking a pause in your life, taking a pause from your day-to-day responsibilities and doing things that radically exemplify self-love. So you're doing something that's not about your spouse necessarily, not necessarily about your kids, your community, your job, your hobbies, your business, but you're doing something that is specifically for yourself to take a pause, to relax, to rest, to rejuvenate, to engage in a Sabbath, as we would say in the church. And so self-care can look various different ways, for various different people. It has to be something that feels authentic and peaceful to you, but nonetheless, you are taking a moment to pause and have a moment of stillness and peace and do something that brings you joy and fulfillment in your life. Now, what is the reason that many Black people do not engage in self-care, or they might just take a picture and post it on Instagram like self-care? But what is the reason that Black people may not be engaging in self-care? They might be posting about it, but what's the reason that they may not be fully engaging in it? What is the reason that Black people may not be fully taking advantage of therapy? There are many reasons. Some of the reasons that Black people do not take advantage of therapy is because systemic and systematic oppression and racism in this country. So many people, they fear going to therapy. It could be that they financially cannot afford it. It could be because they have a misunderstanding of the benefits of therapy due to their religion. And it could also be due to the oppression that we've seen happen here in the United States. So historically, psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, therapists, historically, they have been old white men. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, a person might feel more comfortable to go to therapy if the therapist can relate to them. If they go to therapy and they see someone who is familiar to them that they might feel safe with. And also, we live in a country where Black people have been experimented on in the medical community. The doctor who they call the father of gynecology was experimenting on Black women, and I don't want to be too graphic or morbid, but slicing open wombs, slicing open vaginas and vulvas, and not giving these women any numbing medication, and figuring out how to do gynecological procedures by experimenting on Black women. And so this has been a common theme in the medical community. You know, you can look at the Tuskegee gentlemen that were given syphilis and then studied. There's just so many examples in our history where doctors, nurses, psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, et cetera, have taken advantage of Black people. So many Black people do not want to go to therapy. They may view the therapist as a PO who's trying to send them to jail, a social worker who's trying to take their kids. And we are continuing to perpetuate post-traumatic slave syndrome by saying what happens in our house stays in our house, and not seeking out healing and seeking out self-care. And historically, Black people have not really had time to practice self-care. I don't imagine that Harriet Tubman had time to sit down and write in her journal, you know, that Harriet Tubman had time to go get a massage or light a candle while she was helping enslaved Africans seek their freedom. You know, I mean, we all have probably seen various photos of Dr. Martin Luther King and Brother Malcolm X. You know, I think I read the Brother Dr. Malcolm X's autobiography that he wrote with Alex Haley. I read that book last year. It was transformative, changed my life. And in reading that book, I saw that Brother Malcolm X took a vacation once. In his entire life, he took a vacation once. You know, and I don't know that Dr. Martin Luther King got to take many vacations. You know, when you're carrying this mantle of trauma and trying to help your community around you that may be impoverished, traumatized as well, it has not been something that has been modeled for us to seek out self-care. So I want to let all of you know that if you need a therapist, you can have any type of therapist: a Black therapist, a white therapist, a Hispanic therapist, an Asian therapist, a Native American therapist. There's a plethora of therapists to choose from. There are therapists who are Christian, Muslim, Hare Krishna, Jehovah's Witness, Baptist, evangelist, whatever you need. Get in where you fit in. You can find a therapist that aligns with your beliefs. You can find a therapist who is heterosexual, gay, trans, whatever it is that you need to seek your healing. There are therapists available that might be familiar to you and look like you and help you to seek out what you need. We don't have to be living in this bubble of post-traumatic slave syndrome. We don't have to be continuing this on. It is up to us to take self-care into our own hands and encourage our family and our friends to encourage in self-care, whether that's doing things that are therapeutic, like going to the spa, writing in a journal, getting a massage, listening to music, whatever works for you, or also going to a therapist. Ways that you can find a therapist: you can go to your primary doctor and you can get a referral for a therapist. If you don't have insurance through your employer, you can seek out insurance through the welfare system, through government assistance. You can go to this website, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. It's samhsa.gov. So SAMHSA stands for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. You can get help finding a therapist there. There is NAMI, N-A-M-I, National Alliance on Mental Illness. That's National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI. There are support groups there. You can find a therapist through your local church, through your local community center. I personally love the website Psychology Today. Type in your zip code and find a therapist that's close to you. And I just adore, and love Therapy for Black Girls. Therapy for Black Girls is a similar platform to Psychology Today that specifically is geared toward Black people. Go to therapyforblackgirls.com, type in your zip code, find a therapist that may be in your area. And now that we're living in this, I guess, pseudo post-COVID age, you do not have to go see a therapist in person if a commute is not going to work with your lifestyle. You can do therapy online and see your therapist virtually via Zoom and other HIPAA compliant platforms. So you can seek out therapy in person or virtually. If you do not have health insurance through your job, or you're having trouble getting therapy through government aid, call your local government and ask for help getting benefits and getting a therapist. And if you seek out a therapist and their fees seem to be too expensive for you, let the therapist know, this is my financial situation. Can you see me on a sliding scale? And so I'm not going to hold y'all hostage. That's my time for today. I really do want you to get this book and read it. It will shine so much light on what Black people go through, because Victoria truly documents her own personal experience as she was experiencing post-traumatic slave syndrome and was not even aware of it. I remember when Victoria would not practice any self-care at all because she was on autopilot, working herself to a point of burnout. And I have done that to myself as well. And if we want to be a blessing to ourselves and a blessing to the people that we love, we need to seek out therapeutic resources, whether that be going to therapy or something else. So I've shared with you the resources to getting a therapist. If you need to get in contact with me, you can follow me at Anna_the Life Coach. That's Anna_the Life Coach. You can email me. You can DM me. I'll send you the resources. Follow my YouTube channel, Anna the Life Coach. And thank you all for allowing me to be here.
Thank you so much, Anastasia. That was amazing. Self-care is definitely key, and it's often lacked in our community. So thank you for sharing that. So moving on to our next speaker, Lola Ratumi. Lola Ratumi studies history in her spare time to understand the past and how it has affected our present in the hope of being a part of the solution. Lola is a lecturer in international trade law. She chose to develop a career in this field because she sees economic empowerment as a pivotal tool in raising people out of poverty. Lola, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Victoria, for having me as well, and for allowing me to speak on this topic. I've been passionate about it for years. And for those seeking out their roots, I hope that this talk will inspire you. So between 1510 and, thank you, between 1510 and the mid-1800s, when the transatlantic slave trade took place, approximately 12 million Africans were unplugged from their lives forever. So they were yanked out of their homes, their language, their religion, their communities, their cultural values. They were forcefully disconnected from their identity and taken to a place where everything that they valued and represented were decimated. That ended about 200 years ago, yet African Americans are still haunted by the vestiges of slavery. So as discussed by Anastasia, many academics maintain that African Americans have inherited an extensive list of dysfunctional attitudes due to the trauma that they endured from enslavement many generations ago. African Americans aside, I think that Africans also might be affected by a residual effect of colonization, which has led to a corruption of culture and has resulted in a dysfunctional value system. So for example, I grew up in Nigeria, and not one aspect of my history curriculum covered the achievements of pre-colonial Africans. In fact, the history of Africa started with the coming of the Europeans. So to not have included the history of Africa in the history curriculum of an entire generation in an African country shows a complete disregard for one's own culture. I think that there is a need for both Africans and Africans in diaspora to appreciate their history. And so I'd like to introduce us to some civilizations of pre-colonial Africa. So next slide, please. Thank you. No, this is right. If you go back, please, the pre-colonial, this one, thank you. So the first civilization is that of the Garamantes. The Garamantes were an advanced civilization which lived in the south of modern day Libya. So it's on the screen, the image on the screen, which is essentially a desert, approximately 2,000 years ago. Their civilization was at its height between 500 BC and 400 CE. In 100 CE, the empire covered 70,000 square miles, which is almost the size of Britain. At one time, they would have had a population of over 50,000 inhabitants. Greek and Roman writers sometimes describe them as having the complexion of the Berbers of North Africa, and at other times, the complexion of the Blacks of sub-Saharan Africa. Archaeological discoveries of skeletons in the region most closely associate them with the peoples of Niger, of Mali, and Chad. So why were they said to be advanced? Well, one, because of their engineering brilliance. They successfully cultivated the barren desert land through their complex and extensive subterranean water irrigation system. This made them farmers in the desert. The Garamantes were able to provide enough water for their people, but also for farming. So they did this by digging out underground channels called fogaras. Through the construction of these complex, sophisticated irrigation systems, they grew and they traded in dates, in grapes, in wheat, in barley. They were also known for their military. They had a formidable military and introduced horses, camels, and wheeled transport to the Sahara. The Roman historian Tacitus said that they even raided Roman coastal settlements. So the Garamantes were a formidable civilization because they were able to turn barren land into an urban center by using advanced technology. And they achieved this 2,000 years ago. They displayed resourcefulness, brilliance, tenacity, and business acumen. Next slide, please. So this is the Malian Empire. This empire was started by Sundiata Keita in 1235. It existed from 1235 to 1645 and spans across modern-day Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, Guinea, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, and Guinea-Bissau, all in West Africa. So why were they great? Well, one, they were known for good governance. The Malian Empire was a federation of kingdoms, And in 1236, a Charter of Rights was established, forming the basis of how the empire would be governed. This is known as the Manden Charter of 1236. Some consider the Manden Charter to be the world's first human rights charter, predating the Magna Carta, and also one of the earliest constitutions in the world. The Manden Charter was oral, but we know about it today because it was passed down by the griot clan, the storytelling clan, which still exists today. And they were charged with ensuring that history was not lost. So they transmitted history and laws from generation to generation. In 1998, a scholarly group of them put together as close a representation of the charter as possible. And in 2009, it was adopted by UNESCO on the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. So some interesting articles include Article 5, everybody has a right to life and to the preservation of physical integrity. This is the equivalent of the right to life as embodied in many human rights charters today. Another interesting article is Article 16. Women, it says, women apart from their everyday occupations should be associated with our management. This article shows a respect for and a policy of inclusion towards women. So the Manden Charter displays a clear appreciation for law and order. It shows a system of governance and the creation of social norms. The Malian Empire also established Timbuktu as a center of learning. In the 13th century, Sundiata Keita made Timbuktu his capital. It then grew to be a center of trade and of Islamic scholarship and culture. The ruling class freely adopted Islam from their contacts with merchants, and they were never colonized by the Arabs or the Muslim world. From the reign of Mansa Musa, so Mansa Musa was a king 2 generations after Sundiata Keita, mosques began to be built across the empire, along with several universities where books were accumulated in large libraries. These universities, in addition to Islamic theology, taught law, grammar, logic, history, geography, astronomy, and medicine, making the city famous far and wide for their doctors. European explorers only reached Timbuktu in the early 19th century. Although rumors of Timbuktu's wealth had reached Europe centuries before, the first explorer to return to Europe with first-hand knowledge of the city was in 1828. So next slide, please. Next slide, thank you. Mansa Musa on this slide. Mansa Musa awakened the world to the stupendous wealth of the Malian Empire when he traveled to Mecca in 1324. On his way, he stopped in Cairo, accompanied by a 60,000 strong entourage, and is reported to have introduced so much gold into the local economy that through giving, through gifting and spending, that for the next 10 years, Cairo was still struggling to recover. He is considered to be the richest man of all time, with indescribable wealth in the trillions of dollars in today's money. Europeans took note. He was included in the Spanish Catalan Atlas of 1375. That's what's on the screen. It's a Spanish atlas, seated on a throne with a gold crown and a scepter in one hand and a nugget of gold in the other. Through the Malian Empire, we see governance, scholarship, and wealth of international standards, which were achieved through completely indigenous initiatives. The Malians had not been colonized by the Arabs, and the first Europeans to successfully travel to Timbuktu and return the first European to do that was in 1828. Next slide, please. So Ife Kingdom, and we're looking specifically at Ife art. Ife was an ancient city which flourished between the 11th and the 15th century CE. It is found in modern-day Nigeria. By the beginning of the 11th century, Ife had grown to become a large walled city with several large stone buildings. Some of the city streets were even paved with terracotta tiles to make them more resistant to rain. Ife is particularly famous for the magnificent metal sculptures its artists produce, which include the calm-looking, life-sized human heads so masterfully crafted. And that's what's on the screen now. Europeans once wrongly considered them to be the work of another civilization. Next slide, please. Benin Empire. Close to Ife was the ancient Benin Empire, also found in modern-day Nigeria. It was established around 900 CE, and it ended in 1897 when its capital, Benin City, was raided by the British. Benin bronzes is the collective name for artifacts from the empire. Some depict social history. So, for example, the art showed trade and diplomatic contacts between Benin and Portugal, with emissaries voyaging between both nations. Plaques from the 15 and 1600s also showed Portuguese mercenaries fighting alongside the Benin army. So one of the images on the screen shows the British army in front of the king. So the king is the Oba, in front of the Oba's palace, with the artifacts that they had taken from the palace. And then the others show the Benin art from the 15th and the 16th century. The one directly under that, in front of the Oba's palace, shows the Portuguese mercenaries or the Portuguese army. So today this art is found in museums all over the world. Even today, these works would be impressive. They show the crafters were intelligent and they were masters of art. They finessed their skill and technique without any outside influence.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. And this map on the screen now is a map depicting other pre-colonial African nations which you might want to research. In conclusion, all across Africa, we can find examples of engineering brilliance, good governance, business acumen, scholarship, and artistic genius, which was equal to anywhere in the world. As Africans and African diaspora, we all have a right to these abilities, and we should own that and celebrate that. Next slide, please. So if you're thinking of visiting Africa, the countries listed on the screen are tourist friendly and might be a good place to start. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much, Lola. That was amazing. I learned so much within that short period of time. And as many mentioned in the chat, like this is information that our families, our children need to know. So thank you again for sharing that information. And hopefully one day I could take a trip to one of those countries. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Victoria.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kendra. I have to almost fight back tears, Lola, and I'm so honored to have Lola and my best friend, Anna, to share this platform with me, because I wish you could have been my third grade teacher to teach me and slowly walk me through this process, to teach me that as a child that yes, like your dark skin came from somewhere, and look what these people did who look just like you. And I think that was the missing piece when my father was trying to do that. And it's so important for me now because I have two young boys. My husband is from Africa, and I'm so intentional. And I'm doing the things and I'm saying the things over them that I wish was spoken over me. So they're not going to become self-hating adults who in Jesus' name will become successful and not want to choose a white wife just because of self-hate, but have access to anybody because he loves himself at the end of the day. Am I talking to somebody? And thank you so much, Anna, for sharing your piece, because like I said, if you read my story, and Anna said out of her own mouth that I would just be on go mode all the time. And it wasn't until this year that I took my own mental health seriously. When, if you read this book, I should have been getting help since elementary school when I was dealing with the bullying. But everything was just like compounded over time. So I really thank you so much, Anna, for sharing the resources and how people can get help if they choose to get help. Now we're gonna go to the book reading, and I'm super excited about this portion. I actually recorded myself because I didn't want to be like crying and emotional or studying or like shaking my book like this. So I'm gonna set up the scene, okay? So I think this is like year 3 of being unemployed. And I received the mission to find my ancestors. And a second part of the story is I discovered that my father did not know his own father, and that my last name was actually his mother's maiden name. So I was using ancestry.com to not only find my ancestors, but to also find my father's father as well. So I got frustrated to the point that I stopped contacting Black people and started emailing white people on ancestry.com, like, do you know who my grandfather is? And one day, my cousin, and I named him David in the book, I asked him, does he have any information about my grandfather? And he said, no, but I can try to help. And eventually through my genealogy mentor, we discovered that we're related because of a slave owner named Joseph Gregg. Now, when my genealogy mentor told me that my last name is a slave name, you thought I hated myself before? It even disgusted me to say my own last name when I discovered the name and the person who gave my family their slave name. So she had read our DMs going back and forth, right? So she was just like, well, this is how you're related to him, but like, Vicky, don't be mad at him. Like, that's history's fault, not his fault. So I ended up reaching out to him, and he invited me to his home to talk about our shared history face to face. So I'm going to press play, and you are going to see what happened in that encounter. Without further ado. Oh, I'm sorry. And I should also say that if you want to follow along, this is chapter 11. And the section would be apology tour, stop 1, apology tour.
Stop 1, apology tour. Like Utah, I'd never been to Atlanta, Georgia either. Seeing all the Black and multi-ethnic people bustling around the Atlanta airport made me feel at home. After obtaining a rental car, we drove straight to the HBCU where Cousin David worked. I was more nervous meeting him than Cousin Bruce because A, David is white, and I flew across the states to meet him. Have I lost my mind again? And B, I had no idea how our conversation would go. Would he be defensive? Would I be angry? These were some of the thoughts that were swirling in my head. Our initial meeting was sweet. David was a fairly tall, middle-aged gentleman wearing a blue polo shirt, brown leather jacket, and tan pants. We spotted each other and hugged like we had known each other for years. David treated us to lunch at the school's food court and gave us a tour of his classroom. The next day, we got down to business. David invited us to his house for breakfast and said we can shoot our interview in his living room. Holden and I pulled up to the most beautiful suburban neighborhood I had ever seen in my life. Every lawn was perfectly manicured. Neighbors were outside walking their dogs, and children were playing on tire swings. Upon entering his house, a beautiful aroma of sweet tea and peach cobbler and fried foods filled the air. After meeting his lovely wife, new baby, and 2 young boys, we enjoyed a beautiful breakfast spread his wife had prepared for us. After we ate, Holden and I left to set up the stage. David and I sat across from each other on his dining room table. Camera 1 has a close-up shot of me. Camera 2 has a wide-angle shot of the both of us sitting across from each other. And camera 3 has a mid-range shot with David's face in focus. Holden declared, "The sound levels are good, okay? Action." I start. "So, do people call you crazy for meeting me and having our conversation filmed?" I asked David boldly, as if I was Wendy Williams. I wanted to catch him off guard so I can establish myself as the interviewer and make this meeting all about him to protect myself from further hurt. Also, I genuinely wanted to know why he'd agreed to meet with me. During my search, I encountered some white people who flat out told me they had no Black people in their families or simply blocked me. But here we were. I'm in his beautiful home, sitting with him, face to face. People must think he's crazy, right? David replied confidently, "No, loved ones who know about my interest in genealogy and my research at the HBCU support what I'm doing. I enjoy having conversations like these with my African American students." Although his response wouldn't have made the Hot Topic segment on the Wendy Williams show, he responded so quickly I needed more time to prolong the inevitable questions about me and my feelings. So I asked what I thought was another curveball question. Why aren't more people doing this? Why aren't more Black and white people sitting across the table like we are having this conversation? David broke eye contact with me, glanced at his cherry wood table, and fumbled with his hands. With his eyes fixed on the table, he said, "You know, some white people are afraid." Genuinely confused, I asked, "Afraid of what?" Our eyes reconnected, and he said, "Other white people who find out their genetic relationship to African Americans are afraid that they might ask them for money." My body froze. Even though David was not talking about himself or me, the old self-hating Vicky crept back in, and my worst nightmare was playing before my eyes. I felt ashamed. Here I was, broke, with no job, sitting next to the man who practically financed my trip here. I had no intentions of finagling money out of him or even talking about reparations. My mother said something I thought was very strange the night before my Atlanta trip. As she was preparing dinner, she said, "Make sure you tell David that you got a master's degree and that your parents have great jobs." I rolled my eyes and walked out of the kitchen. I thought to myself, this is not a date. We're going there to talk about our shared history. My mother was trying to imply that we were good and did not need David's money. How could I be so foolish not to see what she was saying so I could have mentally prepared myself for this response? It rendered me speechless, and I sunk lower in my seat. In a compassionate voice, he asked, "How has this whole experience been for you?" I blinked hard to suffocate any trace of tears and gulped aggressively to make sure my voice didn't crack when I answered. "Painful. My journey from start to finish has felt like an outer body experience. I had to stop my genealogy research for the past 3 months because my heart couldn't take it. I just couldn't take it," I said as my voice trailed off. We shared a brief moment of silence, and then I continued. "I am being spiritually led to do this. God wants me to find my ancestors. It seems as if I have been running away from them my whole life. I'm almost at my breaking point. I can't read one more plantation owner's will. I can't read more slave schedules or narratives anymore. Before I started my research, I could read historical documents in school with no problem. Now, these documents feel heavy to me. The people listed as property are no longer random, faceless names. These people are my people. They belong to my family, and I've shed many, many tears. David interrupted, compassion still in his voice. I'm so sorry, Victoria. Caught off guard by his apology, I tried to neutralize the situation by forcing a smile. I said, "Oh, I'm not angry." Through this process, I kept telling myself, "I've never been a slave. You have never been an enslaver. I don't hate white people, and I hope white people aren't afraid of me." Clearing his throat, David boldly declared, "On behalf of all white people, I would like to apologize to you for what my people have done to your people." My jaw dropped. My mind exploded. I thought to myself, who am I? I'm not worthy. I spent most of my life not giving a damn about my history, and now I'm receiving an apology for the pain and suffering that history, not David, caused. My motive for coming to Atlanta was to have an academic conversation about our shared history. I didn't come for sympathy, to make David feel bad, nor did I come here expecting an apology. With that said, something transformative happened to me at this moment, David and I shared. When David offered me the apology, God lifted a burden from me that I didn't even know I was carrying, or should I say, cared to know that I was carrying. At David's house, I had an aha moment. I had spent my entire life running from who I was. And sitting across from David, I had a revelation from the Holy Spirit to write chapter 1 and the poem of this book. I want to take the time to thank David for his courage and for opening up his home and heart to me. Note, to any Black/African American reading this book, experiencing emotional or spiritual trauma from our nation's past, take this apology as your own. I pray that God will lift your burdens from you. In Jesus' name, amen.
I had to get off camera to do an ugly cry. I want us to heal so bad. And we can do it. We can do it. Whew. With that said, we can take questions. Let me stop sharing my screen. Oh wow, I didn't know that. I just took a look at the chat. Wow. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you, Kendra.
Should we just come off mute?
Yeah.
Okay. Woo. Well, thank you. I don't think I can ask a question without saying thank you for like the intentionality of this event. It was beautiful. I can't wait to read the book. I haven't read the book yet, so I cannot wait to get it. The cover is so beautiful. These are not questions, but everything is pouring out. So my question though, I want to hear, without spoiling the book, like, how long did it take you? I've been working on my genealogy for years, literal years. And
It's so much of a process. I want to just know, how long did it take you from kind of like starting that process to, it sounds like maybe you took the swab test and then going into like uncovering and traveling and doing all of that?
Yes, no, that's a nice question. I took an ancestry DNA kit, a test. Actually, I didn't take it. My parents took it. And then ancestry.com, and I talk about the process in the book, but once you do the DNA test, you have access to people who are related to you, and you have access to their trees. So I was actually surprised at how like less work I had to do, because the work had already been done. So you can literally grab whole chunks of people's trees if it applies to you. So yeah, I want to say, yeah, it took me about like 3 years, but genealogy, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So keep going. Oh, Kate.
Thank you, Victoria. I too need to grab the book and read it, but thank you for this opportunity to be a part of this conversation. My question is, as an African woman, I know where I'm from, and I feel very connected to the continent. But my question is, what do you feel that we as a community, meaning Africans and African Americans, can do to help with that healing process? Because I think, from my perspective, work has to be done on both ends. Because, like, as an African woman moving here in my teens, I got bullied by African Americans, and that was a very unfortunate experience. But it was like really shocking. So, how do we get to a place where we start to collaborate and we start to build a community for ourselves so that healing process can happen?
Ooh, yeah, that's a deep question. I'm going to say half of the bullying that I experienced was at the hands of people who look like me. So I empathize with the African immigrants in this country, because I was called the exact same name. So I know the degrading things that my own people say about our African brothers and sisters. So I definitely think that conversations like this just needs to keep happening. And like Lola was sharing, like learning our history, like how can Black people not bully Africans if they're armed with all this knowledge? It's like, how dare you even fix your mouth to say that? Like, do you know where we come from? So yeah, no, that's a loaded question. If you reach the end of the book, you would know that this is only part one. I only talk about my American research. Part two, I'll talk about like how I discovered my African roots and the colorful conversations that I had. So please stay tuned for that. I think we have questions in the chat. Jessica Martinez, hey girl, says, OMG, I can't wait to read your story. This resonates for so many people of color. My doula just arrived. Oh, sorry, that's not a question, but hey girl, sorry. Okay, Jamie says, are you still in touch with the many individuals at ancestry.com, including the people you were able to visit? I follow one of the the Krista Cowan. She and I are friends on Instagram, and I actually asked her to speak, but her schedule didn't allow it. So no, that's a good question. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I didn't raise. I was trying to find that hand to raise my hand to ask you a question. Victoria, you look beautiful, by the way. Yeah, and congratulations on your book. Now, my question is, a lot of Black people, we have different experiences, right? And for example, I was born in Haiti. My history of being born in Haiti is different from American history. And sometimes I have conversations with, Black American friends or even my Jamaican husband, and we see things completely different because that is not my experience. And I didn't grow up a certain kind of way. My parents actually encouraged me to marry my grandmother encouraged me to marry a white man. So we were we never had the concept of racism. And even when I experienced it, I didn't know that's what it was. So my question is, for us being all Black people and coming from different backgrounds, how is it that you think that we can relate better to one another when we have these discussions? Because sometimes for me, I have a hard time understanding some of the backgrounds or experiences of people. So how do you think too, even though we are of the same race, but we all have different backgrounds, how do you think that it's be better for us as women and African Americans or Black from wherever we come from? How do you think that we can relate better to one another and be sensitive to each other's experiences without being offended by each other's experiences?
That's a good question. I think you just started us off, girl, by, introducing yourself and your background and sharing your stories. Honestly, I think that we just have to keep talking about what we've been through. Let me tell you something. Like every time a friend would text me, "Oh, Vicky, I just read your book," I cringe because I talk about some of the foolish things that I've done in my past. And I don't want the world to know my business. But I know that in order for true healing to happen, we have to share our stories. So yeah, keep talking and keep relating. We can only do it one person at a time, unless you write a book or make a movie, start a podcast. Any other questions? Let's go. Somebody said I had to scroll up to the top to see questions. But if you did ask an earlier question, can you copy and paste it so I can see it? One. LOL, I copy and paste. Well, if there are no other questions, I'm going to respect your time. It is 4:03. I love you guys so much. After today, the prices will go up. So if you are encouraged by the story, encourage people to buy the book today. Jamie says, I have so many questions, but I want people to buy the book. Oh, thank you. Oh, I should make an announcement. I am working on an in-person book signing. And it's most likely going to be in Washington, D.C. So, stay tuned for that. So, but other than that, bye guys. I love you guys so much. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Love you, Vicky.
Love you.
We love you, Toria. Thank you for holding space for us.
And don't you go nowhere. Everybody else, bye.
Congratulations, Queen.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm glad that this is over. And I'm happy that I sought wisdom and recorded this story.
It ain't over. This is only part one. It ain't over.
Now, everybody who's left, is it because you walked away from your screen or you have more questions that you want me to answer? Let me know.
Their phone is in their pocket.
I see. Because I don't want to sign out because I want to comb through these chats because I had the presentation mode up. I couldn't read anything. And it looked like somebody was about to deliver her baby. Online. That's amazing. Wow. Feedback, y'all. Oh. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Mommy.
Wait, Mama Greg was here?
Yeah, she's the other Victoria Carlos.
Oh, come on. I wish I would have known Mama Greg was on here. Come on now.
You can hear my children running around in the background. But yeah, no, I would love to hear your feedback, you guys.
This was amazing. This was so good. I mean, you guys are all great. Victoria, thank you so much for, first of all, giving me the opportunity to help you coordinate and host this event. I think this was by far one of my favorite events to host. And it's very inspiring because not a lot of people, we tend to complain about how we look and how people treated us, and we never dig deeper. And reading your book, I mean, although I'm not done, it's just an inspiration from chapter 1 to chapter 2 and so forth and so on. And so I'm pretty sure we all can take away something from your event today. I mean, even Anastasia is talking about self-care. I'm a big advocate for that because people look at self-care as one way I mentioned earlier, you know, I don't know, maybe going to get your nails done or doing the things that we think self-care is, but you figure it out and you find your way, right? Because I feel like that is lacking in our community. And I think most importantly, our people definitely need therapy, and you providing those resources is a start. And Lola, oh my gosh, you took me back to history class, but in a way that I've never learned history before. And so like many said in the chat today, you providing that information is the information that we need and our children need. And I mean, you just took us back, and I'm so grateful again. I mean, not only was I able to help coordinate and host, but I learned so much, and I'm super grateful to be a part of this. And so thank you, Victoria. And I wish you guys nothing but the best.
Thank you.
Lola, your thoughts?
Oh, you know, I'm still trying to appreciate, because it's really hard being African to appreciate what you guys go through, you know, or what you would have gone through, or these, it's so difficult. And then I see you crying, and I see some people crying, and I'm like, oh my God, you know, this is must really be traumatic. And yeah, and then, you know, and then it becomes, gosh, what do we do? You know, how do we move forward? How do we keep on going? You know, yeah, I mean, so for me, it's being aware of this. And I think that that's what you've done for me, and just making sure that, you know, I remember that not everybody is like me, you know, because when you grow up, you're around the people of your same skin color, there's just nothing, you know, like, yeah, there's just nothing. So I have, like, I really do not have a sense of, you know, I hate to say it, but it's really hard to feel, to see different races, because in my head, everybody's just the same, you know? And then it's when you hear other people's experiences, you realize, no, it's to other people, it's not that simple. And I've really had to work on understanding that, you know, other people are going through other things. And you've just brought that, you know, to the front again for me to remember that. And I suppose just find how we can all work together to heal, you know, how we can constantly, you know, so I love my research that I do, but because I lecture in something else, I don't have as much time as you know, I used to. So all the research that I was doing, I was running, especially during COVID time, and I did so much of it. And now I don't do it as much, but I want to go back because I know this information is really important. I know that there's so many people that don't know this stuff. Even Africans don't know this stuff. You know, I started at the beginning by saying, we're not taught this, and I don't know how we are not taught this. I don't know why. It doesn't make any sense. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. And really, it's how to ensure that we keep on doing something about this so that we can heal. Yeah, you know. So if you have any ideas, you know, if there's something that we are going to work on moving forward from today, I'm in. Yeah.
Man, I'm so happy to hear you say that. Like, when this, some of my business. Before I met my husband, I met a counterfeit Nigerian. He was Yoruba, And I told him that, I said, I didn't know that it was a fact that, like, you know, Nigerian or African students aren't taught like pre-colonial, colonial, wherever they're from, you know, whatever country. So I said, wouldn't it be dope if I like create like a cartoon, basically with the information that you would present it, but like in a, you know, in a consumable format to kids. And you know what he tells me? He was just like, well, you need to get, you know, permission from the elders if you want to tell anybody else's story. I'm like, and that put so much fear in my heart. I'm like, case closed. Like I'm not even going to entertain that idea if I have to go through that type of red tape to explain to y'all children who Mansa Musa was.
Who need it. But I don't think that that's true.
I don't think it is either.
No, it's not. So it's not true. And there's so many different nations, so many different civilizations, you know, so if he says you need permission from his, then, you know, you can go somewhere else and give out that information, but it's not true.
As long as you've prayed about something and God has given you permission and you have peace in your heart about it and you're serving his people, let God expand your territory and help the scales be peeled off people's eyes. So again, Victoria, I'm so grateful for you just creating space for people. I think that experiences like this are healing for people. They're educational, it's powerful. I'm so grateful for you, Kendra, you know, being the host and the moderator. I think you were the perfect person to do this. Absolutely. So I believe God hand selected you to be here and do this. You are phenomenal. And Lola, I'm just so inspired by you. I felt truly empowered by everything that you shared. And I think that it is a catalyst for us to pique our curiosity to learn more and to want to help other people learn more. Because, you know, America is the ghetto, okay? You know, we as Black people in America, we are taught to hate ourselves. It is taught, it is intentional, it's subliminal, but it's intentional. When I was growing up as a child, there were only like white Barbies. There were only, you know, I went back and I was watching TV from the 90s and I was watching the commercials, and there really aren't any, like I was watching like commercials for children's toys, and there like are not any people of color in the commercials. Almost all the people are white people. You know, like my parents were very intentional about like getting me Black Barbies, and some of my friends had Kenya dolls when Kenya dolls were out. But it's like people who are not Black Americans don't understand why it was such a big deal that Barack Obama was elected president. Whether you like his politics or not, people don't understand why that was such a big deal for young Black people to see a Black president. Like Tupac rapped about that. He said, we're not ready to see a Black president. Tupac didn't live to see it. My Nana didn't live to see it. People who are not Black don't understand that having a Black Disney princess, even though Disney is problematic, but for us to get a Black Disney princess, people don't understand how big of a deal that is if you're not a Black American, because we are just taught and shown that we don't exist, or we're not important, or we are expendable. So I'm just so grateful for spaces like this, Victoria. So thank you.
Ooh. Anybody else have anything to get off their chest before we adjourn this meeting? Kendra, is there any way that, oh, no, never mind. I found something. Oh, wait, somebody wrote something in the chat. Oh, Anna said, thanks for the debrief. You wrote that in the chat, Anna. I was going to ask you, is there any way, like, when we save the video, is the chat saved as well, or no?
So the recording will go straight to the cloud. I can upload the chat, like a report of what people wrote in the chat. So yeah.
So how do we get the recording? Can I get it? Can I post it? Are you okay with that? Can I put it on YouTube, for example?
Yeah, I'll get the video from Kendra and I'll edit it, because, you know, we talk in the middle of the live. And yeah, feel free to chop and screw that thing, you know.
Yeah, okay.
Girl, with that, girl, you could charge money for that masterclass. Yes. I'm sorry. But yeah, if nobody else has anything else to say, here I'm just copying. Oh, I see. Yeah, I wish I would have talked about the title. I didn't talk about the titles. It's okay. Yeah.
Maybe you can mention that, like, oh, well, no, because you're going to be picking those and whoever is selected. It's not like you're sending out a group email. But maybe if you do send out a group email for those,
for people who didn't show up, no, we can
right.
send a group email with the link of the program.
Yeah.
And then share that the title.
Yeah, and then I can mention the title, because somebody said isn't Akata a derogatory term, but I assume that your book will cover that. Yeah, my book does talk about how I discovered that word. So, but yeah, no, I'll address it in the follow-up. Oh wow, these are a lot of comments. Okay. Copy. Thank you so much, guys, and for everybody else who stayed on to listen to us. All right, bye.
All right, bye, Vicky. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you, guys.